I mean, it's also really important to
Which email? User phone contact. Set URL, like kind of custom stuff like that. You might be better off.
With offices in the US and Japan. His work focuses, this is the word I cannot say in English, F-O-C-U-S. If I say it, it sounds like something else. On craft and technical solutions using design thinking, building WordPress SaaS products on Amazon Web Services and business development where those two ideas meet. Away from the keyboard, he enjoys experimenting in the kitchen, tasting all the beers, traveling and helping with the family business, a pet boutique and bakery named Amelie's Spark Shop, which is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So let's give a round of applause to Daniel, and let's build a better WordPress.
Is this on? Oh, I am. Hi everyone. Thank you for attending my talk. I hope that you are ready to relax after lunch. I have over 99 slides to go over. I have a tendency to go through things really fast, so I like to have more than enough things to talk about. If I do the thing that I always do and I breeze through 99 slides in 15 minutes, we'll have a whole lot of time to talk. And I apologize for someone who has to think this out. So my name is Daniel Olson. I work for a company called Cube, and we develop WordPress SaaS products on AWS. So we are a mix of AWS engineers and WordPress developers, so we have a mixed background. I've been working in WordPress for about 10 years, and I'm from Philadelphia, as you said. So these are the two products that I work on. One of them is called Shifter, and the other one is Animoto. Shifter is a serverless WordPress hosting platform, and Animoto is a fully managed hosting service. So both of these services are things that I might start my day off writing tickets or building features for Shifter, and at the end of the day, I'm answering clients and onboarding sites in Animoto. It's a one-stop variety show for me at times, but I really love it. I love it because it all focuses on WordPress and kind of the tips and tricks to make WordPress run faster or scale better or more secure. So this is where I call home. I've lived here all my life, born and raised, if you know this guy. So this is kind of, me in a nutshell. I love Philadelphia. I love kind of the small town feel, the neighborhood feel to it, but I also love to travel. And this is where all of my coworkers live. I always like to put my maps in weird orientations because north is not really north up. So I have coworkers in Japan, in the Netherlands, and I live in Philly. These are just a few of my coworkers. Like I said, we're kind of split between engineers and developers. So if you meet us at WordCamps, we can talk. We might start talking about AWS products and have a whole conversation not even related to WordPress, or it might be WordPress plugin development. So this talk is called "Let's Build a Better WordPress." And it revolves around some ideas, and I kind of wanted to break it down in a few categories, so I made an agenda. And it's primarily, I want to focus on what this talk is about. I don't think that WordPress is doing anything wrong. I love WordPress. I think that everything WordPress is and does for the past 15 years has been great. I think that WordPress Core contributors have a tremendous amount of weight on their shoulders to kind of continue this huge open source project, and everything they do is magic. Without them, without the contributors, we wouldn't have the WordPress we have today. without WordPress, I wouldn't have the job I have today. I wouldn't have met a lot of the people I know. So I truly love WordPress. I love the community. I think that it offers a lot to a lot of different people. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I think that's very unique. You can't say that about a lot of other open source projects. And I don't know if you feel the same way I do, but since you're here, I imagine we're kind of on the same track. So first, let's just talk about WordPress Core. Who's familiar with WordPress Core? When you talk about core, who knows exactly what I'm talking about? Okay. So WordPress Core, as someone who builds products around WordPress, you kind of have to focus on certain parts of WordPress. And for me, when I talk about WordPress Core isn't really just core. It has your personal data baked into it. And what I mean by that is it's a super monolith. And if you're not familiar with the monolith, I'll kind of give you this example. So this is WordPress Core. If you were to go on wordpress.org and download it, everyone's seen these files before if you've ever installed WordPress. This is your personal data, and this is everything you're not supposed to touch. So if WordPress Core is this is you, this is everything else, that is everything baked into one full file structure. And it's kind of, for me, as a product developer or someone who's working on sites with a lot of traffic, things can go wrong. It's kind of precarious and dangerous. So this kind of structure, it always bugged me. Even since I first started using WordPress and installing WordPress or fixing hacked sites, I never understood why this folder structure existed. And if a lot of people would disagree with me, but I think that it can be done better, and I'll explain why. So this is straight from the wordpress.org site, and it's basically this warning. It's like, hey, do not touch anything in Core except this one file and except this one folder. And if you do want to edit some stuff in Core, make sure you write a text file, put that in the folder. So it's not really a rule. It's like kind of a guideline. But if you start to edit Core files, you're kind of stuck. The quickest way to become the most exclusive open source community is to start editing an open source project that nobody supports. So if I edit WordPress Core, I'm now in the community all by myself because I only know the edits that I've made. They're in this text file inside of the document. It never felt right to me. So what if this is all that's important to me? How would I change this? So what if we treat WordPress Core as a dependency and not as a thing that you download and kind of unpack and then upload to a server? If we treat it as a dependency, we can take this file structure that we have today and we can change it to this. So we have our personal data, which is in WP content, and then we have everything that Core is in a folder called Core. So it doesn't seem like a big change, like how would this make a big difference? But imagine if you've ever had to, imagine if you've ever had to reinstall WordPress. Who's ever had a hacked website? All right, no one has hacked websites, but no, a couple people. All right, I'm joking. WordPress sites get hacked. I mean, you can have the best security. Depends on the server environment you have. If you have bad neighbors, it will happen. Just plan on it happening. Just know that you have a plan to kind of reverse it or fix it. But if you had a file structure like this, it's a lot easier to identify what's important to you and what's not important to you, so you can delete it. Who actually has gone in and deleted or moved around files that are in WordPress Core that have been hacked? Have you ever opened up something and you're like, oh, this is some weird little squiggly bit about prescription drugs, and I can delete that? Nobody wants to. Yeah. Well, when you're starting out, you don't know that. It's kind of this roadmap where you're like, I don't know how to exactly fix this. But if you have a folder structure that's clearly identifying this is important, this is not, you can spend your time on where it matters most, like fixing your theme in case that's been hacked or altered. Now, it's not just about fixing things that are broken or a way to kind of do that efficiently. It's a way to handle as a developer, handle things that are easily replaceable. We don't own WordPress Core, so why are we baking all our folders into, and it's becoming a part of Core. So who's ever heard of things like NPM, Bower, or Composer? So if you're a developer using any sort of build tools, you may use things like Grunt or Gulp. Those are build tools, but these are package managers. So it doesn't matter what build tool you're using a package manager to download the resources and tools that you need for your custom theme or your custom build. So these things help you get software that you don't own and you don't manage, but bring them into your project efficiently. You can identify versions of certain projects. You can identify just the projects that you need. These can even tell you which ones are out of date or which ones might have conflicts with other projects. It gives you a really great insight into the granular parts of your project without having to spend a lot of time downloading files or moving files. And it creates an environment that's easily replaceable. And now, the average WordPress user may never touch these. I'm not saying that people need to learn how to use package managers or like force them to use package managers, but us as WordPress core contributors or core developers, if we have better tools at every level in every part of WordPress to build a better version of WordPress, these are the things that we're going to need to use. So I'm not suggesting that we force package managers on every WordPress user. I just think that we can learn a lot about how they use them and how WordPress core can incorporate them into their project. So WordPress core already does this, but to a certain degree, there's a lot of room for improvement. So for example, grunt files. So there's a grunt file inside WordPress core, and if you're a core contributor and you're writing CSS or you're writing JavaScript, you're going to use that file to compile the code that you need to create WordPress core new version. Now, the average WordPress user isn't going to use that, but there's other packages within core that are unrelated to CSS and JavaScript. So for instance, if you're using a PHP package manager like Composer, Composer is in WordPress core, but there's really nothing inside of it. It's just a package definition that allows you to say, hey, WordPress, I want to download you as a dependency, but WordPress itself is not using WordPress Composer to manage the packages inside of WordPress while we're building. So if you're familiar with Composer or leveraging package managers in PHP, if we start to incorporate some of these ideas and kind of this replaceable, like habits, where we are managing software that we don't own, if we don't need this version, we replace it, we can kind of speed up WordPress core development. And if we have WordPress as a dependency, this is not a new idea. Some projects out there are already doing this. Who's ever heard of Bedrock? Right, so I used Bedrock for a long time, and this is kind of what brought me into the idea of using software that I use but I don't own as a dependency in my project and kind of making it disposable. So the unique thing about Bedrock to me is the simple fact that they install WordPress in a different directory. They install WordPress in something called Web, and then there's a folder called WP, and then all the stuff is in WP. So if I need to reinstall WordPress or change the version, I don't have to touch any of my personal data. I just delete this one folder and swap that out. I don't even have to delete it. I can do it all through Composer, which is the package manager. So I wish that this was standard. I don't think that it will change WordPress dramatically. I think that we could just take a cue from what projects like Bedrock are doing, and we can just use WordPress a little bit differently to kind of make it more clear of, hey, don't touch this folder, don't touch that file. You don't have to look at it because it's in a completely different directory. So this is like the one thing that's always kind of bugged me. It's not, like I said, it's not a huge change, but it started making me think about other things that I would like to change in WordPress. So if you would change anything in WordPress, what would you change? Media library, agreed. The file structure? The database structure. All right, you're dreaming really big. Yes?
Absolute URL.
Absolute URLs.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? I saw a lot of hands, so I know people are feeling something about WordPress. There we go.
like an ORM,
Oh, what?
an ORM, object relational manager.
That's related to the database. Actually, we're going to touch on that. So, all right, so if I could reimagine WordPress, I'd have 3 versions of WordPress. And I've had 3 versions of WordPress for 3 unique, distinctly unique different people. The first version I call is WordPress Outline. So WordPress Outline, to me, is a lightweight API-first headless version of WordPress. So who's ever built a headless WordPress app? Using JavaScript, React. So I do a lot of that work, and I think it's really great. The only thing that bugs me about it is all the extra things that I've never ever used but have to look at. So like comments. I think I've maybe built 1 site that had comments on it. And I've been building WordPress sites for like 10 years. So I don't want comments, but it ships with that. Why can't I make that optional? Why can't I have a version of WordPress that I don't have to scale back to make that front end not visible because I don't want people actually visiting my WordPress site. I just want to use it as a database, an API resource. I have to kind of do a lot of tricks, and I have to do different tricks in all different sorts of ways each project to kind of make this version of WordPress. So this version of WordPress is API first, it's headless focused, but this is a unique case. Not everyone's going to need this, so I imagine WordPress Developer Edition. So this version of WordPress would be focused on people who are contributing to core. It gives them the best suite of tools to manage those dependencies and to kind of build the JavaScript and build the CSS that they need. They can kind of make changes on the fly. They can work with other developers in that community that know exactly what that version is. And then we have WordPress that we know and love today. I don't think we should change this. I don't think we should change how we onboard new users, how it's really easy to use and download and get started. I think that this version is also great. But I want to make sure that we have the best possible environment for people who are contributing to the WordPress project at a technical level. They have the tools that they need. So WordPress Outline. So I want to kind of dive into these. And it might be a dream that these 3 versions will never exist. But I think we can kind of cherry pick some features that are unique to each version that might end up in the WordPress Core project one day, hopefully. So as I said, Alpine is a lightweight version of WordPress, and the idea comes from Alpine Linux. So I do a lot of work with containers, and the base of our containers that we use is Alpine Linux. And the reason we use Alpine Linux is it's incredibly small, and it gives me just what I need to get started. And if I want to add other features or software, I can pick and choose. I can get just the amount of the resources I need to run on that environment, nothing more, nothing less. And if WordPress Outline existed, it would be entirely API first, and it would be perfect for building headless apps, as I mentioned. And I think I went over some of this stuff before, but some ideas that are products that are out there that kind of take this approach is, one of them is Contentful. And Contentful uses the API as the primary way to get and put data into their application. Who's ever used or heard of Contentful? Who's ever used advanced custom fields? All right, if you use advanced custom fields, Contentful is WordPress with advanced custom fields installed and a bunch of other things like not there. The other main difference is it's not open source. It's kind of expensive, or maybe it's free now. Last time I checked, it was expensive. But it doesn't have an ecosystem around it, or it doesn't have a lot of the plugins and features, and it doesn't have a calendar thing, and it doesn't have a e-commerce feature. There's advantages that these have, and what gets me really excited is the technology behind them. And Contentful is not the only one. There's a bunch of these out here. These are the 2 most common that you might see, Prismic and Contentful. But the main thing that I love about these is how they're built. They're CMSs, they're purely content management systems, but the way you interact with them is purely through their API. And the API is incredibly well defined. So if you need something, if you need to do anything with these CMSs, you can get it through a REST API. So WordPress has the REST API, but we can learn a lot from what these products offer and how they build their APIs. So these aren't the only ones. There's a whole culture and kind of product market around CMSs and API-first CMSs, and it's gaining a lot of attention. So if you go on TechCrunch or Crunchbase, where you can see how companies are funded, this is a category, and you can see a lot of venture capitalists are kind of pumping money into API-first CMSs, and that has no indication that they'll ever be successful. But to me, that means that there's something there. There's something kind of going on. And at the State of the Word in 2017 in Nashville, if you go back and watch this video, and not to call out anyone, but someone asked a question about the API. And there was a whole big focus on Gutenberg. And it was like, hey, what about the API? Are we still focusing on that? And it's, I mean, clear as day, API is not a focus in 2018. So it's kind of taken back seat. But in my opinion, if we have a well-defined API, it lays the foundation for a lot of other pieces of WordPress, even Gutenberg. So while it might not be the most exciting or kind of sexy thing we can talk about, it's a really powerful tool, and I think that there's some other services out there that can kind of inform us to how can we build a better version of WordPress, technically speaking, and not just something that looks great. So I think there kind of has to be two conversations around WordPress with this idea. So if we were to compare ourselves to these like API-first CMSs, I have this like us versus them. So what can they do that we can't? And the first thing, the most obvious, is a well-defined API. This is our API. If you want to install a plugin with the REST API, good luck. If you want to do a lot of things that WordPress does with the REST API, you can't do them. And if you do them, there might be limited in what scope of coverage you have. So it's a great start, and I think that this project is what I was most excited about when I first, moved from a power user to a developer, and it kind of stalled. I don't hear anyone really talking about it anymore, except at the enterprise level. If you go to like any enterprise level talk around WordPress, all those sites and companies are all using the WordPress API, but how is that kind of folding back into like the average user? So I don't really know. They win clearly if it's just API only, API versus API. So WordPress ecosystem, one of the great features that you might even describe to clients or someone who's new to WordPress, it's themes, plugins. You've got like 50,000 plugins that in the WordPress plugin directory. Not all of them are great, but even if you take 1% of that, that's way more plugins than those any other competitor has. So we win. Community, obviously, we also win again. So I think that we kind of have the best recipe to cultivate some of these more advanced topics in WordPress. If we just focus on them and focus on them in the right place. The API is a really broad topic. So I don't think it's about just making the API better. It's like, how do we make WordPress better so that we can naturally make the API better? We need to build that development environment, that kind of way to cultivate it naturally, not force people to do it if they don't want to do it. It allows us to make a leaner version of WordPress. So what I mean by leaner is it runs faster, it has a smaller code base, it's easier to manage. It may inform some of those decisions, like just changing the folder structure a little bit, so that if I'm focusing on this part, I only focus on this area of WordPress. And it's kind of funny to me that there's this whole talk about learn JavaScript deeply, and I think I absolutely agree with this. But if you learn JavaScript deeply, what can you do with WordPress? Let's say if you know the most about JavaScript, more than any person ever, what can you do with WordPress? What's the biggest thing that you might think about right now? It's Gutenberg. So you can, if you're really good at writing stuff in React, if you're really good at JavaScript in general, you can do a lot of great things with WordPress, but mostly you're going to be writing headless stuff. You're going to be working outside of WordPress. And if we have a really well-defined API, and we know JavaScript really well, we can do even more things with WordPress. So it's not just for Gutenberg. So the WordPress Developer Edition is just better dependency management. So it's using things like that composer file to manage things that are baked into WordPress that we might not own, remember. Things like Simple Pi. Who's ever heard of Simple Pi? All right. So Simple Pi is something that WordPress does not own, but yet we have it inside WordPress. So this is the file inside the includes folder. If you take a note, it was updated 3 years ago. This is the current version. I took this screenshot yesterday. So Simple Pi is a piece of software that is a RSS feed parser. So it takes data from your site and it kind of spits it out in an XML or Atom feed. And that allows us to do things like connect with it, this, and that. Allows people to read content, allows certain triggers outside of WordPress, it allows you to import, export data. It does a lot of great things, but our version is 3 years old. If you go over to the Simple Pi project, because it's still an active project, it's changed a little bit than the version that we have, but it was last updated almost less than 60 days ago. So what I'm wondering is, the version that's in WordPress and the version that people are still working on, what's different about them? Why haven't we changed this crucial thing in WordPress in less than 3 years? So what if it was easier to manage this dependency that we don't own through something like Composer, and we can change the version, we can import it, we can export it, we can not have it in our project at all if we don't need it. What if we were able to do that with package managers? I don't know. Would it make WordPress more secure? Would it make WordPress faster? These are things that I wonder. What does this have that we don't have? So it uses, this is just one dependency. So WordPress is an open source project. We can kind of take other projects and fold it into WordPress. But Simple Pi is just one of them. What other things are we missing out on? What other better tools might be out there if we could swap that out? So I was thinking, about this, better dependency management, and it really dawned on me that the way that we build WordPress, if we were to improve the build of WordPress, it has a lot to do with DevOps. So DevOps is, who's ever heard of DevOps? So it's developer operations. It's kind of this limbo between I'm a developer, but I also have to take care of maybe a team or a server environment or a production environment. But sometimes I got to write a little code, so I got to know a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's kind of a variety show of technologies. And the thing that I really enjoy about DevOps is this focus on automation. So if you're spending time doing any one thing, could you improve that time through automation? Could you make it the failure rate less? Could you improve the build time? Could you improve the time that you actually need to spend working one-on-one with other people to create new things? It's kind of boils down to work smarter, not harder. So there was an event last year called DevOps Days. Who's ever been to a DevOps Day? They happen in almost every major city. They're not very expensive to go to. If you can't afford that, I'm sure if you message them or say hey, I would love to visit your event. I heard about it at WordCamp. Can I go? Someone might sponsor you. But what I really love about DevOps Days is it turned me on to this greater picture of the teams that are supporting the developers writing code. So they focus on things that if we can use automation to give that developer more time to write better quality code, what can we do? What can we offer them? And the talk that I went on that I saw at this event focused on 3 types of teams. And it was, this is not an exciting title, but high, medium, and low performers. And the way that they broke down performance was not, these are the rock star coders, these are the most talented. It had nothing to do with talent. This was just from first code deploy to code commit, that time in between, how productive are they at actually writing new things and producing and deploying. So the gist of the talk was basically that slow and steady doesn't win the race, that high performers get it all. And like I said, high performers have nothing to do with skill. So high performers have 46 more code deployments than anyone else in their category. And by code deployments is they're writing something, they're committing that code change, and then they're actually sending it to some sort of staging environment. So it's to production, to staging, to actually release. And the change there is what the focus on was like, hey, what are they actually doing? What are the pieces happening below that we can learn as WordPress Core developers that they're doing? What can we also do? So they have an aggressive release cycle, but is that actually better? So this talk talked about they're writing code and doing more releases, but they're having less failures. So the codes that they're pushing, even though they're pushing 46% more code, the amount of times that code failed is dramatically less. And it's not always perfect, but if you can produce more code and write smaller changes, we can actually have less errors. Does that increase security? I think it does. Does that increase the amount of time it takes us between releases? So WordPress Core gets released like every 4 months since WordPress 3, I think. So would we release WordPress Core more often? Will we extend WordPress Core and not focus on major features, but focus on smaller things like swapping out something that was last updated 3 years ago? So if we had better dependency management and a focus on DevOps in WordPress Core, maybe we can change the whole development kind of environment and attitude of building WordPress. So how do we measure this? I'm not sure how we really measure this. And what tools do we have? So right now, WordPress Core, like I said, comes out every 4 months or so. But how are we actually measuring the data, people downloading it, contributing to it, the vulnerabilities? There's a lot, you always see on Twitter, like new WordPress vulnerability, your site's going to get hacked if you don't update it. But where does that metrics live, and where can we kind of use that data to demonstrate this is what we need to focus on, this is what we need to change? So instead of chasing things like this is a better UI because it's fun to look at, or if we change this, we can actually make 30% of the internet more secure. What can SpaceX learn? What can WordPress learn from SpaceX? Anyone have ideas? So the SpaceX model of hiring is get all the talent. That's kind of their MO. It's talented people, not just the most skilled. They might not even know this one particular thing, but they have the talent to kind of figure it out. They're tinkerers. They take things that might be impossible and they make them into a reality. So SpaceX wants those people to work at SpaceX. And if WordPress Core had that same attitude, what could we gain from that? So the thing with gaining all the talent is really hard, is this thing called technical debt. So who's ever heard of technical debt? Right. WordPress Core has an incredible amount of technical debt. And if there's technical debt, it's basically if there's a quick way, we'll do it, but it might not be the best way. If you're writing code that is kind of quick and easy, but you're creating problems for other people later, like taking simple pie from a directory and kind of just dumping it in WordPress Core and committing it, that fixes what you need right now, and then you can kind of keep working on it, but is that the best solution? So if you look at this chart, it shows the amount of technical debt compared to other open source projects. Technical debt is measured by years, so this is years to untangle X problems or X amount of features, and this is never going to change. So you can't untangle what's already been written. You kind of have to take a moment, pause, create a plan, and then change it fundamentally. Change it, put a marker on this version and say the next version will be different. The kind of catch with that is backwards compatibility. I do think it's possible to kind of shift WordPress to a focus of being lightweight API first and dependency, core focused, and be backwards compatible. I think there's a mix in there. I'm not sure how we do it, but I think that if we kind of make it a reality, it will change WordPress is already great. A lot of people use WordPress. I think it will have the biggest impact of WordPress than any other feature that we're talking about today. But how do we reduce it? So if we focus on things that have the greatest impact, like in my opinion, it's there's a lot of people contributing to WordPress, but they're contributing in different ways. So if they're talking about things that are API first, they create that lean version of WordPress. And then rolls into the developer version of WordPress, and then that rolls into the the regular core version that we download. If we kind of not talk about core as one big lump, but actually break it down into very small teams, we might be able to do this. Reduce the footprint. So there's a lot of things that we don't own that are in WordPress, as I mentioned. If we get them out of WordPress and kind of figure out a way to better handle them, we can reduce our footprint so we can actually get a better, a clearer view of the things that are important to us. And better dependency management, if you haven't already heard me say it enough. The thing that everyone talks about now is Gutenberg. But what's the primary motivation behind Gutenberg? Who loves Gutenberg? All right. I like Gutenberg just fine too.
I think the motivation, the long-term motivation is to make WordPress more of a JavaScript-based platform across not just content pages, right?
Yeah, but in core.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the if you dig down deep enough, it's still going to be PHP.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. All right. So 30% of websites all use WordPress. How do we keep that? All right. So this is a chart. This is Sears, Kmart, and Amazon. So this is in 2008. All right. So clearly, Kmart, Sears have way more stores than Amazon. Amazon's the little gold nuggets in the corners. So fast forward to today, and Amazon sometimes they have more stores in different areas. And what changed? They were just really super lean. They could move faster. They didn't have a lot of technical debt. WordPress is a giant today. It's the #1 most used platform but that doesn't mean that it will be 10 years from now. And I'm only saying this to scare people. But to be honest, I think that WordPress is in a great position and has a lot of great talent behind it to make the moves and to make the changes that will ensure that the next 10 years we're still doing, let's say we're the Sears, I don't know, anyone but the Amazon. And the other people will be the Amazon of that day. So will Gutenberg be a game changer? Yes, I do think it'll be a game changer. But it'll be a game changer for a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. But the people behind WordPress building it need the best version of WordPress to kind of make it more secure, make it easier to build, make it more rapidly developed, so that Gutenberg isn't even a thought. It's not even a debate. It's like, hey, this is just the thing that we're doing, and we can roll it out in no time. It's not like a 3-year or 2-year process. So what's next? I don't know. These are the things, these are gripes of mine. These are things that I want to change. If you work on core and you think all these ideas are crap, come see me after. But I don't think that these are the answers. This is just a direction. So this is how I feel. Does anyone have any questions? They're going to kick me off the stage in like 2 minutes.
No, you can keep talking.
Some people are not going to be happy about anything. They're just unhappy people. But Gutenberg is like this incompatibility thing, and they don't want it baked into core. And I think that if we have things like the classic editor and WordPress is open source, there's this ecosystem that is going to make the thing that you need to make WordPress yours. And if you make Gutenberg into that, first version is going to be the first version of the iPhone. It revolutionized things, but if you look back at it now, it's kind of crap. But, the iPhone X is pretty awesome. So what is the version of Gutenberg X? I don't know. It's going to be amazing someday, and I think that it's amazing now. We're on the right track. But Gutenberg is, I think, not the only thing that we should think about. If Sears was like, hey, Gutenberg is like the only thing that we got to push right now, and then 10 years later, Amazon is now taking all their business, I don't want WordPress to be in that position. I want WordPress to be in the best position, technically speaking, so that we can continue to develop and make WordPress as best as it possibly can be.
The Sears situation is a lot more.
Way more complicated. We don't have pensions, so.
Well, the other thing is, we're not forgetting to be software for 10 years. Sears forgot to be a retailer during the period when they decided that retail was all about real estate.
True. Hold on, I have one more question.
You talk about treating WordPress as a dependency, which I think is great. My team at our agency does that for all our projects. Do you consider extending that to treat the MySQL database as another dependency? And do you see also in the future maybe distancing WordPress from where it is right now, where MySQL is a very heavy dependency, where as opposed to other platforms where you can swap out any number of data, different database implementations, as instead of MySQL.
I think if I could make the roadmap, that would be in it, but it would be much later. So the things that need to happen to make that a reality, there's a lot of stuff before it, and there's probably a ton of use cases that are way over my head that would swap that out and have it like, this is the perfect case. Graphical is one example, but that's not even changing the database schema, it's just how you interact with WordPress. So like those things kind of already exist today, but they're not standardized. If we use WordPress, dependency managements within WordPress, and we could standardize them, then doing stuff like that is like not that exciting. The point of DevOps is to make things like this boring, make them easy to be replaced. And if we get to a certain point one day where that's a boring swap, that would be ideal for me. Any other questions?
We still
Thank
have
you for
time.
coming out. I'll be